You've seen it before. A tiny home tucked into the woods in the dead of winter. Snow piled up against the wheels. A warm apartment building glowing just down the road, and the owner doesn't move. Outside, it's minus 30 degrees Celsius. That's cold enough to give you frostbite in under 15 minutes. Cold enough to kill you if you're stuck outside too long. That owner could leave right now. They have the money. They have somewhere else they could go. Nobody's stopping them, but they don't move. And here's the thing most people never even consider. That choice, staying in a 200 square foot box at minus 30 instead of walking into a warm apartment, isn't desperation. It's a conscious decision. There are 3 layers to this story. The first explains why they stay. The second reveals the technology keeping them warm. And the third is something almost nobody expects. By the end of this video, you'll never look at a tiny home the same way again. So why don't they just leave and go rent an apartment down the road? It seems like the obvious question, and most people assume the answer is money, but that's not it. The average tiny homeowner isn't broke. Plenty of them own their home outright and have steady income on top of it. A month's rent somewhere warm isn't out of reach. Plenty could book a week at a motel without thinking twice about the cost. That's not the problem. The real reasons are more practical and more surprising. The first reason is location. Most tiny homes aren't parked in a driveway in town. They're out on rural land, down a dirt road, sometimes miles from the nearest neighbor. That's usually the whole point. Cheap land, privacy, space to actually own something outright. An acre in the middle of nowhere can cost less than a down payment on a condo, and that trade-off is exactly why so many people choose this life in the first place. But it means the nearest motel or apartment isn't a 5-minute walk away. It's 40 minutes on an icy back road, in the dark, in a vehicle that might not even start in this cold. Some roads out there don't even get plowed until morning. The location that makes tiny home living possible is the same thing that makes leaving complicated. Not every tiny homeowner is living the same version of this life. Some are in wheeled tiny houses that move a few times a year, chasing better land or better weather. Some are in permanent off-grid cabins that haven't moved in a decade. Some live out of converted vans, parked wherever they can find a quiet spot for the night. The setups look different, but winter treats them all the same way. Cold doesn't care what your home is built on. The second reason is what they be leaving behind. A tiny home isn't just a building, it's a whole self-contained system. Water lines that freeze and burst if nobody's there to keep them warm. A wood stove that needs feeding every few hours or the whole place drops to outside temperature by morning. Chickens, goats, dogs, whatever's living on that land depends on them showing up. Composting toilets need monitoring in the cold too, since the bacteria that break everything down slow to a crawl below freezing, and a neglected system can back up fast. Walk away for one night and you might come back to a cracked pipe, a dead battery bank, a frozen coop, or worse. In a regular house, a neighbor might check in. Out here, there usually isn't one. So, they don't walk away. But here's the part that changes everything. Even if the drive was easy, even if the animals and pipes weren't a problem, most tiny homeowners still wouldn't leave. Because of what happens inside those walls, especially in winter, is not what you'd expect. Here's something most people don't know about small spaces. A tiny home has almost as much exterior wall, roof, and floor touching the cold as a full-size house, but a fraction of the space inside to hold on to heat. Square foot for square foot, it loses warmth 2 to 3 times faster than a regular home, which means without the heat running, a tiny home can drop to outside temperature in under an hour. At minus 30, that's not uncomfortable, that's dangerous, and cold isn't the only enemy. In a space this small, 4 people breathing, a pot of water boiling, even just a hot shower can push humidity high enough that it starts condensing the moment it touches a cold window pane or an uninsulated corner. Left unchecked, that moisture freezes into a thin sheet of ice on the inside of the walls. Owners call it the freeze-thaw cycle, and over a winter it can quietly rot, framing that nobody thought to check. So, the obvious solution is simple. Just run a space heater. Crank it up, problem solved. Except it isn't that simple. Most tiny homes run on limited power, sometimes a 30 amp system, sometimes solar and battery only. A single electric heater can pull more power than the whole system is built to handle, tripping breakers or draining batteries dead by 3 a.m. When that breaker trips at 3 in the morning, there's no warning, no beep, no flashing light, just silence where the hum used to be, and by the time anyone notices, the room has already started losing ground. And in a wood frame box this small, an unattended heater running all night is a real fire risk. So the easy fix is off the table. Something else had to take its place. Most people have never heard of it, but tucked into the corner of thousands of tiny homes is a piece of engineering built specifically for spaces this size. It's called a tiny home wood stove, and brands like Kimberly and Cubic have spent years designing them to fit into a footprint smaller than a filing cabinet. Unlike a regular wood stove, these are built to run safely in tight quarters, radiate heat fast, and burn efficiently enough that one load of wood can carry a home through most of the night. The firebox is small on purpose, so the metal heats up quickly and starts throwing warmth into the room within minutes instead of the half hour a full-size stove needs. Some models even run a small fan off the heat itself, no electricity required, to push warm air toward the far end of the home. Most people drive past tiny homes every day and have no idea a system like this is what's keeping them warm. If the wood stove is the standard solution, the mini-split heat pump is the upgrade that changes everything. Modern cold climate mini-splits are rated to work down to -20, even -30 in some models, pulling heat out of air that feels too cold to have any heat left in it at all. Paired with a solar array and a battery bank, some tiny homes run heat all night without burning a single log or touching the grid. It's a second system, running quietly in the background, built to keep the place livable even if the fire goes out. Some owners go a step further and add a small propane generator as a third layer, something that only kicks on automatically if the battery bank drops below a set threshold in the middle of the night. It sits there unused most winters, but on the one night it's needed, it's the difference between waking up cold and not waking up at all. But here's the question nobody ever asks. What happens if it fails? Okay, so let's picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're parked on 5 acres outside a small town in northern Wisconsin. Outside, it's -28 degrees Celsius. The nearest neighbor is a mile down the road. The nearest motel is unreachable without a vehicle that starts. And you wake up cold. You check the stove, burned down to embers hours ago. You check the mini-split. Battery bank's dead. The phone in your hand has 1 bar of signal, maybe if you hold it near the window. The temperature inside is already dropping, and in a space this small, it doesn't drop slowly. Within 20 minutes, it's colder inside than a refrigerator. This is not hypothetical, and every tiny homeowner learns the same rule early on. Never let the fire go out without a backup plan. Because out here, even for a few hours, the cold does not negotiate. Surviving -30 in a tiny home doesn't start when the temperature drops. It starts weeks before. Every experienced tiny homeowner runs through the same checklist before winter hits. The first is insulation and skirting. Sealing the gap under the home keeps cold air from clawing at the floor and can cut heat loss by nearly half. Skip it, and the floor stays cold no matter how hard the stove works above it. The second is pipe protection. Heat tape wrapped around exposed water lines, sometimes combined with a slow drip overnight, is the difference between running water and a burst pipe by morning. A burst line in a space this small can mean days without water while parts get shipped in from out of state. The third is backup fuel. A few days of dry firewood stacked inside, not just outside, in case the propane truck can't get down an icy road. And the fourth is battery capacity. Off-grid owners running heat overnight need enough battery bank to get through the coldest, darkest week of the year, not just an average one. And the fifth is the windows. In a tiny home, glass can make up a huge share of the exterior wall, and it's the weakest point for heat loss by far. Thermal curtains or window plugs cut over half the heat escaping through them, and they cost less than a night at a motel. At -30, that's often the difference between the stove running out by 3 a.m. or holding steady until sunrise. Miss any of these 5, and the cold finds the gap. Now here's what surprises everyone. Ask a tiny homeowner who's made it through a winter at -30. properly prepared, whether they'd rather have been in an apartment instead. Most of them will tell you no, and that answer stops people cold, and the first reason is the quiet. At -30, the woods outside go completely still. No traffic, no neighbors through the wall, no footsteps in a hallway. Just the low crackle of a wood stove and the wind outside a window a few feet from the bed. There's something else, too. In a space this small, you can feel the heat working. You're never more than a few steps from the stove, never far enough that the warmth has to travel through hallways and closed doors to reach you. Owners who've lived through it describe it as the deepest sleep they've ever had. It's a kind of quiet that doesn't exist in any apartment building on any street in America. So the next time you drive past a tiny home in the middle of winter, smoke curling from a tiny chimney, dark windows against the snow, that owner isn't suffering. They're warm, they're prepared, and most of them are sleeping better than you are. What looks like the middle of nowhere to you is exactly where they want to be. Now it's time to hear from you. If you live in a tiny home, what's your coldest night been? And would you trade it for an apartment? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're watching this from somewhere warm right now, what's the temperature outside where you are? Drop it below. I read every single one. And if you learned something today, hit the like button. It helps more people find this channel. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.